first 5 books of the Old Testament. Look at the Mosaic Law. Look at the Law of Moses. Look at everything there and compare it to what Christ's instructions were. That's not to say that Jesus threw all rules to the wind. That's not that there was no law, no rules, no nothing. But look how much easier, how much less complicated it was. And when asked, he taught his followers the way they ought to pray. It also wasn't all that complicated. You address God respectfully and show reverence, honoring his name as holy. You ask that his kingdom may be established here on this earth. You ask him for food to fill your belly. You remember to ask him to forgive your sin, to forgive you for the sins you've committed. And because you are of Christ, just as they were followers of Christ when he was teaching, you forgive those who have sinned against you because you're there in the presence of God. Then, knowing that the world throws a lot at us, you ask God to help you when temptations come your way. It's not difficult, because what he is telling us to pray for, all of those things, are things we need. They're needs. A relationship of mutual love with God, whom we respect and honor. The daily sustenance you need to keep you going. The things that give you energy to stay alive. Forgiveness for the sins that have separated you from the Father. The compassion and the empathy to follow his example and be willing to extend the same grace to others that has been extended to us. And his help in avoiding more mistakes down the road. These are all needs. Things that contribute to our physical, mental, and spiritual health. Christ so often worked to simplify things and to take time to explain things to us. It's amazing if you really think about it. Jesus was one of the first teachers to realize that there was more than one way to teach people and to understand that people needed to hear lessons in different ways. We talk about visual and audio workers. We talk about people who learners, people who need to work with their hands. We talk about that. There are so many different ways Jesus taught with examples people could understand. As I have so often said, something else I love about him. But Jesus did try to simplify things, to make things understandable. And part of that reason is that unfortunately we so often will complicate things. People so often will complicate things. And I'm not saying that there are things in life that aren't complicated, that don't require nuance and to be looked at carefully. But sometimes we will take something very straightforward and mess it all up. And we can even do that to this prioritized list of prayer. We can even mess up some of the things it's talking about. We do this when we confuse things we need with things we want. We take those two columns and we jumble them up a little. Looking to see luxuries that others have. Coveting things that are not necessities. And deciding that our worth as people is measured by getting as many of the things we want as possible. Deciding that the stuff is so important. We tether our happiness to stuff. Whether it's out of covetousness for another, whether it's after deciding that what the world says is important, we tether our happiness to things. We fail to see the simple, common sense fact that needs come before wants. If we could focus our attention away from the nonsense, if we could stop adding complications to our list, how might we see the ways that God has answered our prayers for the things we need? We might actually notice the ways that the Lord has answered those prayers, even in ways we didn't expect. Not only our prayers, but other people's prayers. In fact, we might also notice, if we took the time to look away from the distractions, that we ourselves can be led by the Spirit to be an answered prayer for others. When you've stopped to help the guy with a flat tire on the side of the road. When you've had the big picnic and you decide to drop off the leftover food at the city mission. When you drop in on that friend who's going through a hard time, Frank's having a hard time. He's had something serious happen. And it's really out of the way, but on your way home from work, you're going to stop by and go talk to him. Just visit with him for a little bit. You're just going to go do that. You don't realize it. You may find out years later, you may never find out, that was a turning point in Frank's life. The thing he needed most was a listening ear and a kind word and a friend to take notice of him for a minute or two. And how much that has changed. These things are all answered prayers. If we follow Christ's example out there in our daily walk, it's truly amazing the change that we can make in the world. It's not always complicated to follow Jesus. Not as complicated as we make it. Sometimes it's as simple as trying to be decent to others. At VBS this week we talked about the golden rule. I think it was the second day. The theme was you're in a town. You were in a town in Galilee. My in-laws made a well out of bricks in the middle of it. We had tents up. It was a whole thing. And every beginning time, biblical characters would come in talking about something Jesus had done in the wilderness. He fed the 5,000. They were coming in talking about it to the village. He calmed the storm, and they were coming in talking about it. And the one day, they were coming in because he'd just given the Sermon on the Mount. And so we were talking with the kids about the golden rule. And we talk about the golden rule a lot. We hang it up in our churches, in our fellowship halls. We put it up in Sunday school classrooms, on posters and plaques. We even put it in our homes. But how often do we actually apply it to our lives? How often do we follow it? Quick example. This came across my desk, if you will, in the last month. If you did a survey of restaurant staff, servers, sometimes even managers, and workers like that, so forth, in most areas of the nation, what do you think they would say is usually the worst crowd to deal with in an average week? I'll give you a big hint. They'll be encountering them today. Yep. People leaving church for lunch. People showing up in big groups, dressed to the nines. People who have left their house of worship with the love of God, and somewhere along the route, they trade that for a hatred of waiters. Short-tempered, impatient. The love and compassion didn't last very long. Now, there's not as much evidence for this next part, I'll be honest. There's not as much evidence, but supposedly, that same crowd is also tips the worst. You'd be amazed the number of waiters you hear say they had a big party, who they served, and they had a big bunch. All of them had big, expensive meals. And when they go to get for the tip, they say, "Oh, there's a bill on the table." Well, no, what they've done is they've left a tract. They've left a tract that looks just like a monetary bill. Sometimes it even looks exactly like it, but a little tract with a couple words on it. Reminds me of a passage in the Bible about going to the starving homeless man, patting him on the head and saying, "God bless you," and walking away. Jesus' simple plan was, they will know we are Christians by our love. I don't think he's too happy when he hears, "Why is Michelle crying in the walk-in freezer?" "Oh, because she gave Reverend Smith a diet instead of a regular, and he let her have it." If we can't show Christ-like compassion for the little things, if we can't see others as children of God, how can we even call ourselves followers of Christ? And the reason I say all this is that next part of the prayer. Because it's very easy to ask for forgiveness for yourself. Not always, I'm not saying it always is, but it can be very easy at times to ask for forgiveness for yourself. But we can be sitting there saying this prayer, saying this Lord's Prayer, And do we mean the thing we say after that? Or is there something in the back of our minds that we can't let go? Something that's bothering us that we just can't release? We're saying the prayer, but is this really what's going on in our heads? And forgive us our trespasses, as we, for Pete's sake, I can't believe Edith said that at the preschool meeting. Forgive us our debts, as we forgive our Deborah hit my car last month and lied about it. I can't believe that woman. We struggle in our faith walk because we sometimes ignore a very simple truth. That we are all sinners. We are all sinners, and no amount of pretense, no lie we tell ourselves will change that fact. Amen? Now we can count up and list the sins of others, list their mistakes, committing to memory every wrong that they've done, every hurtful thing, every falsehood. But that will do us no good. You see, when the time comes to meet our Maker, we won't be asked to give an account of other people's lives. It would be so much easier if we followed Jesus' advice. Forgive them for what they have done and focus on our own spiritual needs, our own journey, on the work God has for us to do. Now I say that with this. I understand very much that there are things like trauma. There are things like abuse. There are things that are very, very terrible. And this is a hard concept for a lot of us because we can hold on to things that you don't seem not justified in holding on to. You seem justified, rather, in holding on to hurts and to damage, to brokenness. But the thing is, he's not saying in his simple prayer, he's not saying in his teaching to bring the abuser back into the fold of your own home, to reconnect with those that have hurt you, to allow those things to continue, to go back to harm's way. What he's saying is we must forgive, which is hard. Because we've all stood there, we've all prayed, and still in the back of our minds, 5 minutes later, I just can't get over that thing my cousin said to me at the holidays. I can't get over that thing that happened at the meeting last week. I can't get over that thing that somebody said to me 2 years ago that I keep bringing up. And those are light things compared to some of the things people can bring up. And in his own way, the Lord handled this question for all of us. We all struggle with it. It was well handled, the forgiveness question. He was up on that cross. I could bring you a series of professors, of college professors, who would argue that charming little method of execution the Romans came up with is the worst way to die. Probably the worst form of capital punishment we ever came up with. We could have that argument. I could bring in some experts in history and physiology to make that point for me. Wiser men than I. But that was probably the worst way, the worst form of capital punishment we ever came up with. So as Jesus was up on that worst form of execution, punished for something he didn't do, completely innocent of wrongdoing, as he was suffering for you and I, in a position where he could have called the plan off. He had that ability, God would have answered. He could have called the whole thing off. He could have got himself out of it. He could have said, I'm done, down. What did he say in all this? Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Forgive them. They know not what they do. How much of that was said for our benefit? For those times when we get to that line and we go, well, I'm going to forgive them of their sins except John. I want to forgive them of their sins except Edith. I want to forgive them of their sins, but she said that. Forgive them. They know not what they do. The other thing I love about him, he always seemed to have an answer for when we came up with the but, oh but, you know but. He always seemed to have something ready to counter. So many things in life, so simple. A loving relationship and reverence for our God. The will to help bring about his kingdom here on this earth. The sustenance we need to live each day. Forgiveness for our failings and the drive to follow his example in forgiving others. And the knowledge that we cannot face what is out there without his help. That we are not perfect, that we are weak and likely to stumble, and that we need his help. Such a simple thing. Such a simple thing to guide us in the right direction and help us in our walk.